We are live, but we'll wait for a minute more before our schedule start. Hello, folks, and welcome to GCPP Primetime. For those of you who are first-time viewers of this show, Primetime was an experiment that we started based on the idea that we have very interesting conversations in-house at Takshashila, but we wanted to open it out to the public so that we can engage with a larger and a wider audience. And GCPP stands for Graduate Certificate in Public Policy, Takshashila's flagship online course, which runs for 3 months, and it is largely online, and it introduces students and participants to the fundamentals of public policy. My name is Varun Ramachandra and I'm a policy analyst at Takshashila Institution. Today I'm joined by Seema Sirohi. Seema Sirohi is currently based in Washington as a senior journalist. She received a master's degree in journalism from University of Kansas and studied sociology at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Seema has covered India-US relations for about 20 years now and has written for magazines and newspapers across the world. The formal introduction is over, but we've had Seema before at Takshashila for our internal webinars to our participants. This was some time back, and one of our colleagues, Mr. Pranay, visited the US recently and met Seema, and it coincided with the upcoming trip of Mr. Modi to the US, and we thought it's opportune time to have a conversation with Seema. Hi Seema, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Folks, before we get into the conversation, there are a couple of small housekeeping things that I want to announce. There is a chat window below your screen or to the side of the screen, depending on your resolution of YouTube. You can type in your questions directly onto the broadcast. I have my colleague, Mr. Ramanjit, joining here with me. He'll be telling us about the questions. In addition to this, you can also tweet in your questions to hashtag GCPP Primetime for people who use Twitter. We've in the past have had few technical issues wherein we couldn't take audience questions, but we'll try our best to take as many questions as possible. Getting back now onto the topic, we are discussing today gauging India-US relationship. A couple of weeks back, we discussed Brexit and its relevance to India, and we thought it is relevant to go across the pond and talk about the US. And we have Seema here. Seema, so I'll start with this basic question, right? Mr. Modi is
I can't hear you.
Am I audible?
Hello?
Am I audible?
Yeah, now you are, but with the
technical glitch, folks, we are sorry. It's just that YouTube across multiple continents tends to fail at times, but we'll try our best to minimize it. So, Seema, I was saying that Mr. Modi is visiting the US in a week's time. It's not an official state trip, but still an important trip from an Indian point of view. So, what landscape awaits Mr. Modi? I think this is his second trip to the US. So, what awaits Mr. Modi here?
Okay, so Mr. Modi actually arrives in Washington, D.C., and this will be his fourth visit to the United States and his third summit with President Obama. So you can see in the last 2 years since he was elected Prime Minister, there has been a very enhanced level of engagement with the United States. The purpose of the visit is consolidation and celebration. The diplomats have been saying that the idea is to lead the relationship in strong enough shape for next administration. As you know, we are in the middle of the US presidential election. He comes here basically to discuss 4 or 5 major things. Then the other important aspect of the visit is his address to the US Congress. Okay. So what the Modi government is trying to do is to reach across the political spectrum, both the administration as well as the legislature. Okay. So in that sense, it's an important visit.
Sure. Seema, you mentioned a couple of important things that Mr. Modi needs to address the House of Congress. Now, as a completely isolated in the US, when I say completely in the political sphere. State Department officials were questioning the extent or the nature of the relationship. Now, you mentioned that you were just Congress, so just be a little confused. So I want to ask, how is the system structure?
Okay, so as you know, the US government is basically three branches, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So the executive, which is the administration, consists of what we might think of as government, the State Department, the White House, the Commerce Department, the Defense Department, etc. So the executive makes policy, the legislature has oversight. So the US Congress has oversight, it controls the money. So it questions the State Department, you know, off and on over whatever policy issues come up. So last week they had, or actually the week before last, they had a hearing on US-India relations. So they wanted to take the temperature of where things are. So they questioned the US State Department's Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia, that is Nisha Biswal. And the hearing gives you a flavor of what the legislature is thinking. So it was the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that was holding the hearing, and some of the questions were pretty tough from the senators.
Okay, please go ahead, Seema.
That's basically how it was. Okay.
So you said that the Congress controls the money. So is it safe to assume that by talking to the US government officials, Indian government officials should primarily talk about correct assessment?
Yes. Basically, any government that is dealing with the United States has to keep both sides happy. And there's like, you know, this 1 mile between the White House and Capitol Hill, and that 1 mile is very important. You have to travel back and forth between them. So for the most part, foreign policy is relative of the White House and the State Department, but because the Congress controls money, they can put a block, as they did for the F-16s for Pakistan recently. They simply said, we are not going to subsidize.
If I can interrupt you there, I'm sorry. I think there is a minor technical thing. Would you mind using your earphones? I think there is echo and some of our users are.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I will.
It's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I was explaining that the US Congress blocked the money for Pakistan of the F-16 planes. So this is how they can intervene in foreign policy. Although for the most part, the executive branch has a prerogative on foreign policy issues. But you have to keep both sides happy.
Okay, so so the visit is in the right track. Is that fair to say that?
Yes, absolutely. And Modi will be the first foreign leader to address a joint meeting of the US Congress this year, and probably the last, because now this administration is winding down and everybody's going to get into the election mode. So to that extent, it's a rare honor for India and for Mr. Modi personally, because if you remember, in 2005, I think his visa was revoked by the US government at the behest of the US Congress. So it's a personal sort of victory for him, in a manner of speaking, that he comes back to the to address the very same body that blocked him once upon a time, and now he is the elected.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. So I'll now switch gears and move into the topics that will be covered. So first and foremost, I'm interested in knowing about the nuclear suppliers group. We are hearing noises from across the spectrum about quote unquote NSG or the nuclear suppliers group. Now, what is NSG and why is it in conversation? Seema, in the sense, what is it in NSG that is so important for India and for the US for that matter?
Okay, so it is a 48-member grouping which controls nuclear trade essentially. So it was formed to basically make sure that nuclear components don't get into the hands of wrong people or wrong countries that that could proliferate. So India wants to get into this group because now we are becoming a nuclear power, in the sense we want to switch more and more to nuclear energy. We are becoming important in the nuclear trade itself. And also because after the nuclear deal between India and the US was signed, as you know, in 2008, this was part of the whole understanding that once the deal becomes operational, India will become part of these 4 important arrangements or groupings: NSG, NPC, group, and the Australia group. All these deal with basically missile technology, nuclear technology, etc. Once India is integrated into all these 4 groups, we would, for all practical purposes, be part of the global nuclear club, as it were. So yes, it's very important for us to get in, and that is one of the top things Mr. Modi is going to ask Mr. Obama to do.
So, will we get the deal?
We hope so, but you might have read that China is completely opposed to India's entry. China says that if India gets in, Pakistan should get in too, and despite Pakistan's very questionable proliferation record, so China is basically standing up for Pakistan and to block India.
Yeah. Just to interrupt you,
India has been.
So there are 2 things here. First, I have a question, but before that, I think some of our listeners are, there is some video problem. So I am turning off my video. I am still online, and you can do so if you wish. The question that I had was: is China a member of the NSG?
Yes, China is a member of the NSG, as are all 5 nuclear powers, and other countries, including Mexico, Argentina. So Mr. Modi is going to Mexico after he completes his visit to Washington. So India has been engaged in a very intensive diplomatic outreach to all 48 NSG countries. Modi is coming here from Switzerland, which just announced that it supports India's membership in the NSG. So yes, it's China would be probably isolated and might be the lone objector.
Okay. All right. So, but whether we'll get it or no is still up in the. It's in the open, yes. Right?
It's in the open. Okay. The plenary is in June later, and the US, we hope, is going to put all its weight and might behind India's membership. And what people say is that China doesn't like to be the last man standing, as it was. So maybe the US can prevail over China to withdraw its objections. That's the hope.
Okay, sure. That was a nice primer of sorts, Seema, for us, for a lot of us who don't understand the dynamics. However, there is another small part, right, that I wanted to ask you about. So in India, we are fascinated with Pakistan, right? However, from a United States point of view, has there been a dehyphenation of Indo-Pak, as it were, or is India still viewed in conjunction with Pakistan? Or to rephrase myself, Is there enough decoupling between India and Pakistan in the eyes of the United States? Because I ask this in relation to the next question that I'll ask you, but please go ahead.
Yes, I would say it has dehyphenated India and Pakistan to almost 95%, I would say.
Okay.
It started with the Bush administration when they decided to deal with both countries separately. And the Bush administration said that they want India to be a global power, and they are going to do everything possible to make India into one and help India's rise. So I would say yes, to a large extent that dehyphenation has happened. You can see the relationship with Pakistan is of a very different nature. It is basically centered around counterterrorism and the war in Afghanistan, etc. And most American officials don't have a kind word to say about Pakistan. Why India is a very multifaceted relationship. We have a huge Indian American community here that plays an important role. Then US has can see that India is a large market, is the fastest growing economy in the world today, as one of the fastest large economy. So there's a lot of positive, and only a fool would not see that. Pakistan, on the other hand, requires attention because it is a troubled and troublesome country. So even India wants the United States to.
I want to interrupt you there. Just sorry about that. You said that the Pakistan is a troublesome country. Is that the same words? I mean, does that echo the sentiment in Capitol Hill also?
Oh yes, absolutely. Because the senators and congressmen are under constituent pressure all the time, as you know. Their constituents are parents of US soldiers who are dying in Afghanistan. And many times US officials have publicly said that Pakistan supports the Haqqani network, which is behind many of the attacks that kill American soldiers. And so there's a lot of realistic understanding of Pakistan and its intelligence agencies' role in Afghanistan. Everybody now knows that they are the patrons of the various terrorist groups that operate in Pakistan and in Afghanistan.
Fair enough. Folks, if you have any questions, please type them onto the chat window that you can see to the right of your screen or at the bottom of the broadcast screen. You can also tweet us at using the hashtag GCPP Primetime. We look forward to your questions. Seema, I just have another small bit about Pakistan. Like most of the times, I don't want to focus more on Pakistan, but will these aspects be discussed during the upcoming visit, or will it be largely ignored and the primary focus will be on, say, issues like the NSG, climate change, or much more important issues, if I can say so?
The way the Indian officials like to say they will discuss regional issues and the international situation. So yes, to that extent, Pakistan will be discussed, and ever so gently, Mr. Modi might raise the issue of how there is a divergence between India and the United States over policies towards Pakistan. He might suggest that US and India need to synchronize their policies a bit more and work together to moderate Pakistani behavior. So yes, Pakistan will be discussed whether we, like it or not.
Sure. So I asked the Pakistan question largely as a precursor to my next question. But yeah, so the point is, I want to be a little provocative here. Do you think India is being discussed in the United States primarily because China is United States' #1 foreign policy priority, or as India is being seen as a proxy to kind of, see that given that the geographical vicinity between China and India, so Do you think India is discussed independently or in conjunction with China? The question earlier was about decoupling, now it's about coupling with another country.
I think both aspects are true. Yes, but we must not forget for India, discussing China with the United States is equally, if not more important. Because after all, we've had a war with them in '62. We share a very, sort of kind of tense border with them. We have a lot of issues. The Chinese want to kind of keep India entangled with Pakistan, so it can never be a real rival. So to that extent, the balance of power that the American presence or American support provides is equally important for India as it is for the United States. Yes, United States can see that India is the only large enough country that can be in Asia. We share values. Both countries and countries like Japan want freedom of navigation. They want the system, the international system as it has existed all these years to remain so. I think India would be very uncomfortable if China were making the rules for this century for trade or whatever have you. So I think it cuts both ways. Yes, China is a big factor for the United States, but it's also a big factor for India.
Fair enough. So then in that case, shouldn't the Indian establishment decouple itself from Pakistan and make the United States and China as its primary focus?
It does. To a large extent, it does. I mean, all our defense, let's say, capabilities or acquisitions are geared more towards making ourselves safe in case something happens vis-a-vis China. I think Pakistan is more a nuisance because of all the terrorism that it sponsors, and it's a huge irritant and a constant irritant. So to that extent, we cannot ignore Pakistan. But in terms of the larger defense preparedness, I think the focus is on China as far as Indian strategists go and as far as all the war gaming goes,
I just have one frivolous comment, if you will, about Pakistan being a nuisance. It is amply demonstrated in the hit TV show House of Cards. I'll just stop it there. I'm sure a lot of our audience members have watched it. But Seema, before I move to the next question, we have a very interesting question by one of our listeners, Sushovan, who asks us, what diplomatic benefits will India get by entering the NSG, by getting its NSG membership? Is that a tangible diplomatic tool?
Many benefits. Absolutely. Clear technology tool. Actually, it will allow for free, more access to technology, and will be part of the rule-making body. It will be grow.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there is a lag in what you just said. If you could repeat your answer, and if possible, if you could switch the video off, I think it might improve the audio quality. I'm really sorry about this, but please go ahead.
Okay, so I've switched the video off now. So I was just saying, it is it would be a strategic and technological sort of tool, not so much diplomatic, but India would be able to trade and buy nuclear technology, have more access to fuel and things like that. And as India increases the percentage of nuclear power in its energy basket, it needs to have more access. And it's all tied up together with green, becoming more green as we go into the future. Everybody wants India to be more green and use less fossil fuel. Now,
Yeah.
you can't have countries blocking Indian access to nuclear technology and also demanding that we find a magic formula to grow without using any form of energy. So we have, they have to include India for some very important reasons. So yes, I think it'll be a very important tool for us. It'll be very important for us to enter the NSG.
Sure. So, Shubhan, I hope that answered your question. If you have more, please send us in. I have another question by Mr. Guru Iyer. Guru asks, does the US pivot strategy to the Pacific see India in a much larger role? He says the above question is in context of the upcoming ruling by the United Nations that is expected about China's claims of sovereignty in the South China Sea. You did mention briefly about this with respect to Japan, but Seema, could you explain us if on this?
Yes, yes, India is a very important part of Obama's pivot to Asia policy, or now it's being called rebalancing to Asia. Um, and as far as South China Sea and all the various disputes go, India doesn't want to come out very out in the open because it doesn't have direct stakes in those disputes. But in terms of having freedom of navigation and since so much of the trade, 2/3 of oil goes through all those sea lanes, etc., it is important for India that China not become the hegemonic power over there. So to that extent, India will be watching very closely what happens in the Philippines case, as is the United States. It is said in Washington that once that arbitration is complete and judgment is delivered, you might see a more robust American response in the Pacific.
Sure. One more thing which Mr. Guru is asking, he says with the UN CLOS, I'm not sure what that is, becoming an important issue in South China Sea, does the United States see India as a key player?
Yes, I mean, UNCLOS is the UN law of the seas, which is kind of the basic, the bedrock of the rules that govern the international seas, as it were. So yes, upholding those rules is very important, and the use of UNCLOS in dispute management is very important. India has abided by all these international rules, recently in the case of Bangladesh. So India has set a very good example. China, on the other hand, says, no, these rules are not for us, and we are going to settle all our South China disputes, South China Sea disputes bilaterally, which is another way of saying we are more powerful, we can prevail over these smaller countries. We don't care about international rules. So for the United States to maintain the way the system has worked, India is very important, UNCLOS is very important, and enforcement of these rules is very important.
Sure. Guru, I hope that answered your question. Seema, I get a general feeling that the India-US relationship is on an upward trajectory. But there is an election coming just around the corner, right? So since we have about 5 to 10 minutes more and I'm not seeing any audience questions yet, I'll just bring this up. I know it's a detailed topic unto itself, but how should Indian establishment view the upcoming elections, or should India even worry about what is happening? I shouldn't use the word worry. Should India even be concerned about what is happening in the United States elections slated in later this year?
Yes, India should be concerned. Any country, I mean, any US presidential election is important for the world community because who the US president is important because US is still the preeminent power. this election is particularly important because of the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, that is Donald Trump. He has basically said he's going to change all the rules. And that is worrying for not just India, for almost all countries. Mr. Obama said the other day that he was at a G7 meeting and world leaders are rattled, quote unquote, rattled by the possibility of a Trump presidency. So yes, everyone is concerned, not just India. Mr. Trump says all kinds of things and changes his mind from day to day. He's not in favor of the alliances that the US has maintained all these years. He wants to build a wall against Mexico. He's very protectionist in terms of how he thinks about trade. So all those things can have a huge impact on the global climate.
Sure. So but irrespective of who wins or not, if the relationship is on an upward trajectory, do you think given that there are a lot of economic implications, do you think things might go for a toss if whoever wins? I mean, whoever comes to power, it's the upward trajectory usually in international relations is maintained, right? At least for the period of in the initial few years, at least. Or am I wrong in that assessment?
No, you are absolutely right. But that's under normal circumstances. This election is by no means a normal election. In the kinds of things that are being said, the Republican Party itself has tried very hard until about a month ago to scotch the potential of Trump becoming the nominee. But then he managed to sort of defeat all the other contenders. So I think the trajectory will survive, hopefully, and that is another objective of this visit by Mr. Modi, that you start a lot of things, you put a lot of things in motion that the bureaucracy can take forward in case there is President Trump next year in the White House. Can the bureaucracy maintain the momentum for a little while till Trump decides to do anything different? So yes, I mean, broadly speaking, if it were a normal election, we wouldn't have to worry because there's bipartisan support for the relationship with India. Both Republicans and Democrats value the relationship. They both repeatedly have expressed that India is an important strategic partner, etc.
Sure.
But with Trump, we just never know.
Yes, I mean, fair enough. Sure. Seema, look, I think we have another very interesting question by our audience here, Mr. Sandesh Anand. It is particularly relevant because I am talking from Bangalore. The question is, how high on the agenda is the issue of visas for highly skilled immigrants? A matter of great concern for all Bangalore residents, for most Bangalore residents, because Bangalore being the information technology capital and things like that. How high it is on the agenda, or how high do you think it should be on the agenda if it is not already on the agenda?
It is on the agenda, and it will especially be on the agenda when Mr. Modi meets the US Congress, because they are the ones who make these laws. And recently they raised the fee for H-1B visas to...
They doubled it, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, they doubled it to almost 4,000 or 6,000 per visa or something like that. So yes, it'll be very high on the agenda. And in his address to the joint session of Congress, he will probably raise it, not maybe in so many words as H-1B visas, but he will, I'm sure he will say how important Indian technology workers are for the US economy, and how the protectionist instinct in America should be curbed. And in private meetings, I'm sure he will raise it, and strongly so. Another issue he will raise that is related is working out a totalization agreement between the two countries, which would allow H-1B workers who have gone back to India to draw upon the social security money that they put into the US system.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount,
Pension pot, is that the pension pot?
Yes.
Okay.
So they, when they work here, a portion of their salary goes into Social Security, and you're supposed to get it back when you retire, etc. And but there is no agreement between the two countries for repatriation of this money to those people, and the U.S. excuse, I call it an excuse, is that the Indian social security system is not up to snuff. It's not as sophisticated as we are used to, so we are not even going to talk about it. So we're just going to pocket this money because it's easy money. Why should we return it? So it's like a very self-serving kind of thing the Americans are doing. They are powerful. They are doing it because they can.
Okay.
So that's one thing Modi government has made a priority. Let's see how far they go in that.
Sure. Seema, there is a late surge in the number of questions. We have about 10 more minutes, so I'll take probably 2, if time permits 3. But before that, whatever agreements the two leaders come to in this upcoming meet, changes cannot happen until the next administration is in place, right?
Right. I mean, drastic changes cannot happen. But if you start work on a new agreement, basically it's the bureaucrats who have to do it, right? So once the leadership agrees, it's the bureaucracy, which is a permanent bureaucracy pretty much. They can continue working. A lot can happen during the transition period, especially with the Pentagon and defense. The defense relationship has done much better than other aspects of the relationship. So, if they agree on some, whether it's defense trade and technology initiative, new projects, they can continue working without any, problems, even for the next couple of years.
Sure. Seema, the next question is by Pranay, who I'm surprised he's joined in spite of the jet lag. Thanks a lot, Pranay, for joining in. Is cooperation in Afghanistan likely to feature in the agenda of this visit?
Yes, Pranay, I think it is, especially because Mr. Modi went to Afghanistan to inaugurate the dam that India had built in Herat province. So, and that was such a big thing. It just showcased what Indian policies have done in Afghanistan as opposed to Pakistan's policies. So yes, it'll be very much part of the agenda, and the Americans want India to continue this development work. They have said that repeatedly in public and private, because India is a very stabilizing influence over there at this time.
Sure, Seema. I'll quickly move to the next 2 questions because we have about 7 minutes. Praveen Chandrasekharan asks, can India's engagement with the Afghanistan in the recent times, can that be interpreted as India trying to play a more active role in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. Afghanistan is extremely important for Indian security, because if you remember last time when the Taliban were in power, Afghanistan became kind of a hub of all kinds of terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden and every other, big terrorist leader. So it's extremely important that Afghanistan not become like that again, and India is doing whatever it can to ensure that doesn't happen. And I think the Americans are with India on that. India has reached out to Iran. And together they kind of want to isolate Pakistan and reduce its influence on Afghanistan.
Sure. We have another question by Sushoban, who asked the earlier question about diplomatic benefits of an NSG membership. Sushoban asks, haven't the recent Indo-Iran agreements raised some hostile eyebrows in the US government?
Not hostile eyebrows, but yes, there was. They were keenly watching from here what agreements were being signed, and at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing that happened a couple of weeks ago, they did ask some probing questions. Basically, the senators wanted to know if India was in violation of any, sanctions against Iran, which many of them are still in place. So the State Department representative Nisha Biswal testified that no, India is not in any violation, and the State Department is watching all that. But I think at the end of the day, the Americans do recognize that for India, the friendship with Iran is again a very important part of its strategic outlook in the region. It gives access to Central Asia, gives access to Afghanistan, and it makes India's outer periphery safer to have Iran as a friend. Plus, it's a supplier of oil, which is again very important.
Very important. I have actually a couple of questions around this, but I will reserve this because we have another information technology question by Sandesh. Sandesh asks us, has there been any progress on the cybersecurity cooperation between the two countries?
Yes, I believe they are likely to sign some sort of memorandum on cybersecurity, but most of the discussions that have taken place on cybersecurity have been preliminary and quite hush-hush. We don't know too many details because, but the White House under Obama has conducted 2 or 3 very important bilateral meetings with India on cybersecurity cooperation. I think India is also kind of hesitant yet. They haven't maybe come to the kind of trust level that is needed to talk about these issues openly.
Sure. We have a couple more questions. One is about the US elections. I will not get into that because that is a largely, that's a topic unto itself. I'm really sorry, Vivek. To conclude, Seema, I just wanted to bring about this issue about whether the upcoming visit is actually a state visit or it is not a state visit. Does it actually matter what kind of visit it is, the semantics of it?
It is a working visit, not a state visit. In the end, the differences in protocol and the pomp and show and state dinner and all those kind of extra benefits. But at the end of the day, if you're getting done what you need to get done, it really doesn't matter whether 6 buglers welcomed you when you came to the White House. It's more, countries attach a lot of importance to it being a state visit, but I think from a very pragmatic point of view, if you sign the right agreements, if you reach a better understanding and you get things done, how does it matter whether Modi got a state dinner or he didn't? Actually, he's getting only a lunch at the White House.
Sure. Well, on that note, I think we've just about run out of time. We have about a minute more, which is not enough to take any questions. So, folks, you can interact with Seema on her Twitter profile at Seema Sirohi. If you are interested, you can also interact with me on Twitter at _QUALE_Quail. Seema Sirohi, thanks a lot for joining us. And we hope to continue our conversation with you in the future because there is quite a bit of gap between our last interaction and now. Thanks again for joining us. Folks, see you again next week with another interesting topic with the promise of breaking all the noise around the primetime news that we see across TV channels. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening. Good night. Thank you, Seema.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.